Raziel's wings cut through the cold night air, his scales the color of dried blood, his eyes burning with a rage that had no bottom. Behind him, 20 dragons flew in formation, their wings beating in rhythm, their tails lashing, their voices silent. They were hunting. They were hungry. They would not stop until they found what was taken. The Emberclaw pack had ruled these mountains for generations. Their territory stretched from the frozen peaks to the lowland forests, and every creature within it knew their name. They were fierce. They were proud. They were feared. But 2 nights ago, someone had dared to enter their lair. Someone had slipped past the guards, past the traps, past the fires that burned at the entrance. Someone had taken the eggs. All 5 of them. Raziel's eggs. Sarah's eggs. The future of the pack. Raziel had returned from the hunt to find Sarah standing over an empty nest, her body shaking, her eyes wild. She had not screamed. She had not wept. She had simply looked at him, and he had seen something in her face that he had never seen before. Fear. Not for herself. For their young. The trail had been hard to find. The thief had covered their tracks, crossed rivers, climbed ridges, doubled back. But dragons do not lose what is theirs. They found the scent, faint but present, leading down from the mountains, through the forests, into the lowlands where the 2 legs lived. Humans. Raziel had never trusted humans. They were small, weak, short-lived. They built walls of stone and called them homes. They hid behind their fires and their weapons, afraid of the dark, afraid of the wild, afraid of anything larger than themselves. They feared dragons, and rightly so. But one of them had been foolish enough to steal from the Emberclaw pack. One of them would learn what fear truly meant. The pack flew through the night, over rivers and valleys, over villages that huddled in the dark. They did not stop. They did not rest. The trail grew stronger, leading deeper into the forest, away from the settlements, toward a place where no human should be. A place where the trees were old and the shadows were deep. A place where the scent of smoke hung in the air. Raziel saw the cabin before the others. It was small, built of rough stone and timber, tucked into a clearing that the forest had almost reclaimed. Smoke rose from a stone chimney, thin and white against the dark sky. Light glowed through a small window, warm and golden. It was a place that should not exist. A place where a thief thought they could hide. He landed in the clearing, his claws digging into the soft earth, his wings folding against his back. The pack landed behind him, their bodies filling the space between the trees, their eyes fixed on the cabin. They were ready. They would tear the door from its hinges, drag the thief into the light, and show them what it meant to steal from dragons. Raziel stepped forward. The cabin was small, too small for a dragon to enter, but he would not need to enter. He would tear the roof off, crush the walls, reach inside with his claws and pull the thief out. He would make them watch as he searched for his eggs. He would make them scream before he ended them. He lowered his head to the door, his breath hot, his teeth bared. He was ready to tear it from its hinges. He was ready to show this human what it meant to steal from dragons. Then he heard it. A sound. Small. Soft. A chirping sound. He froze. It came again, a high, thin chirp, the sound of something small and helpless. A sound he had heard before. A sound that lived in his dreams. A sound that he had feared he would never hear again. Hatchlings. His hatchlings. He pulled back, his rage forgotten, his heart pounding. The sound came again, not one voice but many. 5 voices. 5 chirping, crying voices. His eggs had hatched. His young were alive. He looked at the cabin. The light glowed through the window. The smoke rose from the chimney. The scent of warmth and life filled his nostrils. His hatchlings were in there. With the thief. With the human who had taken them. He did not know what to do. Every instinct told him to tear the cabin apart, to destroy everything between him and his young. But the chirping was soft, content. They were not crying in fear. They were not crying in pain. They were chirping the way hatchlings chirp when they are warm, when they are fed, when they are safe. Raziel stood before the door, his claws in the earth, his breath misting in the cold air. Behind him, the pack waited. They had heard the chirping too. They were silent, waiting for his command. He did not give it. He could not. He stood there, the leader of the Emberclaw pack, the terror of the mountains, and he did not know what to do. His young were alive. His young were inside. And the human who had taken them, the thief he had come to kill, was the one keeping them that way. He lowered his head to the door again. This time, he did not tear it. He pushed it open, gently, with the tip of his snout. The wood creaked. The light spilled out. And Raziel, for the first time in his life, did not know what he would find. Raziel stood frozen in the doorway, his great body blocking the night behind him. The chirping came again, soft and thin, and his heart, a heart that had never known fear, beat once, hard, against his ribs. His hatchlings. They were alive. He reared back, his claws scraping the stone, his wings half spreading in confusion. The eggs had been taken 3 days ago. They were not due to hatch for weeks. Without the warmth of the lair, without the heat of Sarah's body, they should have died. The cold would have seeped through the shells, stilled the hearts inside, turned them to stone. They should be cold and still. Instead, they were chirping. They were alive. They were here. He looked back at his pack. They stood in the clearing, 20 dragons waiting for his command, their eyes burning, their bodies tense. They were ready to tear the cabin apart, to burn it to ash, to drag the thief into the light and make them pay. He raised a claw, a signal to wait. They did not understand, but they obeyed. They always obeyed. He turned back to the door. This time, he did not tear it. He pushed it open, gently, with the tip of his snout. The wood creaked. The light spilled out, warm and golden, and Raziel stepped inside. The cabin was small, one room, with walls of rough stone and a roof of timber. A bed sat in the corner, its blankets rumpled. A fire burned low in a stone hearth, its flames casting shadows that danced across the walls. The air was warm, warmer than the forest outside, warm as a dragon's lair. It smelled of smoke and wood and something else. Something soft. Something alive. There were blankets on the floor, piled in a nest, thick and soft, arranged with care. And in the nest, curled together in a bowl of soft scales and tiny wings, were 5 hatchlings. They were sleeping. Their chests rose and fell in rhythm, their small bodies rising and falling together. Their scales, the color of embers, glowed softly in the firelight, pulsing with the warmth of their dreams. They were small, smaller than they should be, their wings folded against their backs, their claws tucked beneath them. The runt, the smallest, lay at the center of the pile, its head tucked beneath a sibling's wing. And above them, wrapped around them, his arms cradling them against his chest, was a human. He was a young man, thin, with dark hair that fell across his face. His skin was pale, pale with exhaustion, pale with something that might have been hunger. He was sitting against the wall, his legs drawn up, his body curled around the hatchlings like a shield. His eyes were closed. He was asleep too. One hand rested on the runt, the smallest hatchling, its crooked wing pressed against his palm. The little one had its head tucked against the human's neck, its tiny claws gripping his shirt, its scales warm against his skin. Raziel stared. He did not understand. This human had stolen his eggs. This human had taken them from the lair, carried them through the mountains, hidden them in this cabin. This human should be a thief, a monster, a creature to be killed. But the hatchlings were alive. They were warm. They were sleeping peacefully against the chest of the creature who had taken them. They were not afraid. They were not cold. They were safe. He stepped closer. His claws clicked on the stone floor, the sound sharp in the quiet room. The human stirred. His eyes opened, slow, heavy, fighting against sleep. He saw Raziel. He saw the massive dragon filling the doorway, the scales the color of dried blood, the eyes burning in the firelight. He did not scream. He did not run. He looked at the hatchlings in his arms, then back at Raziel. His eyes were tired, rimmed with dark circles, but they were not afraid. I found them in the forest, the human said. His voice was hoarse, rough from disuse or from cold. Raziel could not tell. They were in a broken nest. It was cold. They were dying. I brought them here. I kept them warm. Raziel's tail lashed, once, twice. You stole them. The human's arms tightened around the hatchlings. His hand pressed against the runt's crooked wing, gentle, protective. I saved them. His voice was stronger now, steady. They would have died. You know that. The nest was cold. The eggs were cracked. I brought them here. I kept them warm. I fed them. They hatched 3 days ago. Raziel looked at the hatchlings again. He looked at their small bodies, their soft scales, their folded wings. They were alive. They were warm. They should not be. He looked at the human's hands, wrapped around the runt, saw the small cuts on his fingers, the burns on his palms. He had handled the eggs. He had held them when they were cold, warmed them with his own body. He had fed them, somehow, kept them alive. The pack was silent behind him. He could feel them watching, waiting. They had seen the hatchlings. They had heard the human's words. They did not know what to do. Neither did he. He looked at the human. Why? The word came out low, rough, almost a growl. Why save them? The human looked down at the hatchlings. His hand moved, gently, over the runt's crooked wing, tracing the bone, checking it. Because they needed help, he said. He looked up at Raziel, and his eyes, tired and dark, held something that Raziel had never seen in a human before. And I was there. The fire crackled. The hatchlings stirred, chirping softly in their sleep, pressing closer to the human's warmth. Raziel stood in the doorway, the leader of the Emberclaw pack, the terror of the mountains, and he had no words. His young were alive. His young were safe. And the thief he had come to kill was the reason. He did not know what to do. So he did nothing. He stood there, in the small cabin, and watched his hatchlings sleep. The pack did not attack. They stood in the clearing, their wings folded, their tails still, waiting. They could feel the hatchlings inside, could hear their soft chirping, could smell their warmth. The hatchlings were alive because of the human. They were warm, fed, safe. To kill him now would be to harm the young. And dragons do not harm the young. But they did not leave either. Raziel sent most of the pack back to the lair. They went reluctantly, their eyes lingering on the cabin, on the light that glowed through the window. But they went. He kept only a few, those who could hunt, who could guard, who could watch. Sarah stayed. She would not leave. Her children were inside, and she would not leave until she could take them home. They could not take them yet. The hatchlings were too small, too weak. Their wings were soft, their scales thin. The journey through the mountains would kill them. So they waited. They watched. The human's name was Elias. Raziel learned it from the things the human said to the hatchlings, soft words spoken in the quiet of the cabin. Elias. A hunter, a loner who lived in the forest because he preferred the quiet. He had found the eggs in the wreckage of a nest, scattered and cold, their shells cracked. He could have left them. He could have sold them. He could have eaten them. Instead, he had built a fire. He had wrapped them in his own blankets. He had slept with them against his chest. For 3 weeks, he had kept them warm. When they hatched, he fed them with his own food, softened with water, given by hand. He stayed awake for days, watching them, learning what they needed. Raziel watched from the forest as Elias tended to the hatchlings. He saw the human warm milk over the fire and let it cool before offering it to the little ones. He saw the human clean the runt's crooked wing, wrapping it in soft cloth to keep it straight. He saw the human talk to them, soft words that meant nothing, but his voice was gentle, and the hatchlings chirped in response. He saw the human sleep only when the hatchlings slept. He saw him wake at every sound, checking on them, touching them, making sure they were still warm, still breathing. Sarah watched too. She lay beside Raziel in the forest, her golden eyes fixed on the cabin. She did not trust the human. She could not. He had taken her children, carried them away from the lair, hidden them in this place. But she saw what Raziel saw. A creature that had given everything to save her children. A creature that held them when they cried, fed them when they were hungry, stayed awake when they needed watching. A creature that was doing what a mother should do. On the 3rd night, the runt's wing worsened. Raziel heard the cry from the forest, a thin, weak sound that cut through the silence. He rose, his wings spreading, his heart quickening. Beside him, Sarah rose too. They moved to the cabin, their steps silent, their bodies low. Through the window, they saw Elias holding the runt against his chest, rocking, whispering. The hatchling was crying, its small body shaking, its crooked wing pressed against the human's palm. Elias looked at the fire. He looked at the window, at the dragons watching from the dark. His face was desperate. "I don't know what to do," he said. His voice was cracked, broken. "I don't know how to fix it." Raziel stepped forward. He pushed the door open, his bulk filling the small room. Sarah stayed outside, watching, waiting. He looked at the hatchling in Elias's hands, at the crooked wing, at the pain in the small creature's eyes. He lowered his head. His breath was warm on the hatchling. He touched it with his snout, gentle, careful. He spoke in the old tongue, words that Elias did not understand. Words that hatchlings knew before they were born. Words that meant safety. That meant father. That meant home. The hatchling quieted. Its cries stopped. It opened its eyes, still blind, still unseeing, but it knew. It knew its father. It nestled against Elias's chest, its body relaxing, its breath slowing. Raziel pulled back. He looked at Elias. "The wing must be set," he said. His voice was low, steady. "The bone must be straightened. I cannot do it." My claws are too large. My teeth are too sharp. You must do it. Elias looked at his hands. They were shaking. I'll hurt it. You will save it. Raziel's voice did not waver. You have saved them. Now save this one. Elias took a breath. He held the hatchling against his chest, felt its small heart beating against his own. With one hand, he reached for the wing. The bone was small, fragile, like a twig that would break at the slightest touch. He touched it. The hatchling chirped, a small sound, not a cry. Elias's hand shook. He closed his eyes. He set the bone. The hatchling screamed. A thin, terrible sound that tore through the cabin, through the night, through Raziel's chest. Then it stopped. It breathed. It settled against Elias's chest. The wing was straight. Elias opened his eyes. He looked at Raziel. His face was wet. He did not speak. He could not. Raziel looked at the hatchling, at the straight wing, at the human who had held it steady when it hurt. He looked at Sarah, standing in the doorway. She was watching, her golden eyes soft, her body relaxed. She was not afraid. She was not angry. She was something else. Something Raziel had never seen in her before. The hatchling chirped. It nestled against Elias's chest, its tiny claws gripping his shirt, its head tucked beneath his chin. It slept. Raziel said nothing. He turned and left the cabin. He walked into the forest, into the dark, and stood beneath the trees. Sarah came to him, pressed her head against his neck. He did not move. He did not speak. He stood there, the leader of the Emberclaw pack, and something in him began to change. Something he did not have words for. Something that felt like trust. Something that felt like hope. Something that felt like the beginning of something he had never thought possible. Days passed. The hatchlings grew stronger. Their scales, pale gold at first, darkened to the deep red of their parents. Their wings, once soft and folded, unfurled and learned to flap. Their voices grew louder, their chirps becoming calls, their calls becoming sounds that almost had meaning. They learned to crawl, to climb, to follow. And they followed Elias everywhere. When he cooked, they sat on his shoulders, 5 small dragons perched on a human's shoulders, their wings flapping, their voices chirping. When he sat by the fire, they curled against his chest, their bodies warm, their breathing soft. When he walked outside, they trailed behind him like ducklings, their claws scratching the earth, their wings beating the air. They did not leave his side. They did not want to. Raziel watched. He had stopped hiding. He sat in the clearing before the cabin, his great body curled in the sun, his eyes half closed, his scales gleaming. Sarah was beside him, her head resting on her claws, her golden eyes following the hatchlings as they played. The pack had come and gone, bringing food, bringing news, but Raziel and Sarah remained. They had not taken the hatchlings. They had not tried. They were waiting. They were learning. Elias talked to them now. He sat on the cabin steps in the evening, the hatchlings playing at his feet, and he spoke to the dragons who watched from the clearing. Not in the old tongue, he did not know it, but in his own words, simple words, honest words. He told them about the hatchlings, about their habits, their favorites, their fears. He told them which one liked to be held a certain way, which one needed to be fed first, which one was brave and which one was scared. He told them about the runt, the one with the crooked wing, who was the smallest but the strongest, the one who fought hardest, the one who cried when Elias left the room. Raziel listened. He did not understand all the words, but he understood the meaning. This human knew his children. He knew them better than Raziel did. He had been with them from the moment they hatched. He had fed them, cleaned them, held them when they cried. He had done what a parent does. He had been their father when their father could not be there. Sarah moved first. She rose from her place in the clearing, her steps slow, her head low. Raziel watched her walk to the cabin door, watched her pause, watched her step inside. He followed with his eyes, but he did not move. He wanted to see what she would do. She entered the cabin and lay down beside Elias. Her great body filled the small room, her scales brushing against the walls, her tail curling around the hearth. She looked at the hatchlings, at her children, and she did not take them. She watched them crawl over Elias's legs, over his arms, up to his shoulders. She watched them chirp and play, safe and happy. She watched them love the human who had saved them. She lowered her head. She touched Elias's hand with her snout. It was a small gesture, a gentle touch, but it held everything. Trust, gratitude, something that had no word in any language. Elias looked at her. His eyes were bright. He did not speak. He did not need to. He lifted his hand and placed it on her snout, and they stayed like that, the human and the dragon, while the hatchlings played between them. Raziel came to the door. He stood in the frame, his bulk blocking the light, and looked inside. He saw Sarah at peace, her eyes closed, her breath slow. He saw the hatchlings, alive and strong, their scales bright, their wings beating. He saw the human, sitting against the wall, his hand on Sarah's snout, his face calm. He saw a creature who could have been an enemy, who should have been an enemy, but had chosen to be something else. Something dragons had never had. A friend. He sat at the door and watched. The sun set behind him, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The fire burned low in the hearth, its light flickering on the walls. The hatchlings grew tired, their chirps fading, their wings folding. They crawled to Elias, curled against his chest, against Sarah's side, against each other. They slept. Elias slept. His head fell back against the wall, his eyes closed, his breath slow. He was exhausted. He had not rested since the dragons came. But now he slept, and he was not afraid. Sarah slept. Her head rested on her claws, her eyes closed, her body relaxed. She had her children back. She had something else too. Something she had not expected to find. Raziel stayed awake. He sat at the door, his eyes moving from the forest to the cabin, from the cabin to the stars. He watched over them all. The hatchlings, the human, his mate. He watched, and for the first time in his long life, he understood. Strength was not the only thing that kept a family alive. Sometimes it was warmth. Sometimes it was patience. Sometimes it was a human who held a dying hatchling against his chest and refused to let go. Sometimes it was a dragon who learned to trust. Sometimes it was both. He closed his eyes. The night was quiet. The fire burned. And in the small cabin at the edge of the forest, a family slept. Not a pack. Not a human and his pets. Something new. Something that had never been before. Something that would last. The day came when the hatchlings were strong enough to fly. Their wings, once soft and folded, had healed into leathery sails that caught the wind. Their scales, once pale gold, had darkened to the deep red of their parents, gleaming in the morning light. They chased each other through the clearing, their voices shrill with joy, their wings beating the air, their claws scratching the earth. They were dragons now, small but fierce, their bodies filled with the fire of their kind. They were ready to go home. Raziel stood in the clearing, watching them. Sarah was beside him, her golden eyes following the hatchlings as they played. The pack had gathered, silent, waiting. They had come to take the hatchlings back to the lair, to raise them as dragons should be raised, to teach them to hunt, to fly, to rule the skies. They were ready. The hatchlings were ready. But the hatchlings did not go to them. They flew to Elias. They landed on his shoulders, his arms, his head, 5 small dragons covering the human in a tangle of wings and scales and chirping voices. They nuzzled against his neck, pressed their heads against his cheeks, wrapped their tails around his wrists. They did not want to leave. They did not understand why they must. Elias knelt in the grass. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. He took each hatchling in his hands, one by one, and held them against his chest. He whispered to them. He told them they were brave. He told them they were strong. He told them they must go, must fly, must be dragons. He told them he would always remember them. He told them he loved them. The hatchlings chirped. Their voices were soft, sad, but they understood. They felt their parents behind them, felt the pack, felt the pull of their own kind. They looked at Elias, at the human who had saved them, and they knew they would not forget him. They would never forget him. They flew to Raziel. They landed on his back, his wings, his head, 5 small dragons chirping and settling, finally home. Raziel felt their weight, their warmth, their trust. He felt the pack stir behind him, ready to fly, ready to leave. But he did not move. He looked at Elias. The human was standing now, his arms empty, his face wet. He was smiling. A small smile, tired but real. He raised his hand, a wave, a goodbye. Raziel stepped forward. He lowered his head until his eyes were level with Elias's. He spoke, his voice low, steady, so that only the human could hear. "You saved them," he said. "You gave them life. You gave them warmth. You gave them love. We will not forget." He reached out with his claw, gentle, and touched Elias's chest. Right where the hatchlings had slept. Right where his heart beat. "You are pack now," Raziel said. "You are family. This valley is yours. The skies are yours. The pack will protect you, as you protected our young. You are not alone. You will never be alone. Elias looked at the dragon. He looked at Sarah, at the pack, at the hatchlings chirping on their parents' backs. He did not speak. He could not. He put his hand on Raziel's snout and held it there. The pack rose. They circled the cabin once, twice, 3 times, their wings beating the air, stirring the leaves, raising dust. The hatchlings chirped, their voices high and bright, a song of farewell, a song of promise. Then they flew away, toward the mountains, toward home. Elias watched them go. He stood in the clearing until they were specks against the sky, until they were gone. He turned and walked back to his cabin. The fire was low. He fed it, watched it grow. He sat by the hearth, alone for the first time in weeks. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. He closed his eyes. He saw the hatchlings. He heard their chirps. He felt their warmth against his chest. The fire crackled. The night deepened. He slept. In the morning, he woke to a sound outside his door. A scratching sound, soft, patient. He rose, his legs stiff, his back aching, and opened the door. On his doorstep, curled together in a nest of leaves and feathers, were 5 small rabbits. Freshly killed. A gift. He looked up. High above, circling the valley, were 5 dragons. Small. Red. Their wings beating slow. They had come back. They would always come back. Elias smiled. He picked up the rabbits and went inside. The fire burned. The day began. And somewhere in the mountains, a pack of dragons rose to greet the sun, their young flying beside them, strong and free. They were home. But they had another home now. A small cabin in the forest. A human with gentle hands. A place where the fire never went out. The years passed. Elias grew old. His hair turned gray. His hands, scarred from the cold, grew weak. But he was not alone. Every spring, the dragons came. They landed in the clearing, their scales bright, their wings spread, their voices rumbling in greeting. The hatchlings, now full grown, landed on his shoulders, his arms, his head, just as they had when they were small. They chirped and nuzzled, their claws gentle, their warmth seeping into his old bones. They brought him gifts, food for his table, furs for his bed, stones that glowed with the light of their fire. And when travelers spoke of the Emberclaw pack, they told a strange story. They told of dragons that flew to the valley every spring, that landed before a small cabin, that brought gifts for a human who grew old and gray. They told of hatchlings that rested on his shoulders, that chirped when they saw him, that remembered the warmth of his chest when they were small. They told of a bond between dragon and human that no one could explain. A bond that began with a theft. A bond that became something more. A bond that would never break. The fire burned. The dragons came. And Elias, the hunter who lived alone in the forest, was never alone again.